My name is Jacqueline Evers, and I'm the Executive Director of the Land Connection.
So what was a weakness you perceived in 2020, and how did that go for you all?
So I am finishing up my third year at the Land Connection, and ahead of 2020, we had spent extensive amount of time talking as an organization just about our internal culture and
Mm,
kind of the nonprofit stereotype, right? We were asking a lot of hours of our staff. We were paying mediocre salaries, and we were very committed to a set number of grant projects or other, programs that we were expected to deliver within a certain time period.
mm,
And so going into 2020, we had made a number of decisions about how we were going to structure our organization, who was responsible for which roles and responsibilities, what we needed to do to work on our financial status as an organization,
sure.
and then also what we needed to do to provide some more flexibility within our day-to-day work so that we didn't always have to feel like there was no space for enjoyment of our responsibilities, right? That we
Sure.
got to be the person that determines our destiny versus being tied to all of these obligations that we had.
Sure. Sure. So that sounds like a pretty significant challenge, changing a culture in any organization.
Sure.
Cultures are very resilient.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of work to shift them. So, given that you were starting that work a year ago, how did the pandemic throw a wrench into all of that?
Sure. So, one of the big things that the pandemic did, of course, was to close down our office and
Mm.
send all of our staff home to work remotely, which was fine. We had the technology in place to navigate that, but we didn't have the habits or skills to actually implement the things that we needed to do to
Sure.
be good communicators with each other, right? So,
Mm.
we all continued, the next day. I think it was on a Friday was our last day in operation. So on that Monday, right, we were all at home, we all had Zoom, we all had our path and email and meetings and all of that stuff. But what we didn't take into consideration was how we were going to work together as an organization to still
Mm.
set out to accomplish the goals that we had in place. And so I think that abrupt change in our interpersonal working relationships with each other really had it made us stop and think about, we have all these tools at our disposal. We know this is what we want. So what should we be doing to work with each other and to make sure that we're still communicating and that we're still
Mm.
a team instead of, sitting in our own homes now in our little silos and working independent of each other.
Sure. So it sounds like you had the tools to keep the programs running more or less
Sure.
as was possible in the pandemic.
Yeah.
But the real challenge was keeping the office itself going,
Sure.
the interpersonal internally.
And of course, the programming and all of that had to go through its own redevelopment
Right.
and reconfiguration. But
Right.
I think first step was figuring out how we work together
Hmm.
apart.
Right. Right. So, what was your process for changing your culture, and what were the key factors that you discovered in doing so?
So the process started long before the pandemic came. We had, of course, like I mentioned, identified that we did have some um, internal culture things that needed to be worked on. And so in January, we had started working through a framework called Pro-Social, and
Mm.
it is based on Eleanor Ostrom's core design principles, and it walks you through a matrix of each of 8 design principles and really lays the framework for a safe space to discuss really important things, right? So
Mm.
fair and equitable decision making. So, what does that look like at an organization, and how does it look and feel if it's going well, and how does it look and feel if it goes poorly? And so we had started those conversations ahead of the pandemic. We put a slight pause on them just while we tried reconfiguring how we worked.
Hmm.
And then we resumed those conversations, and early in the pandemic made it through all 8 of those core design principles, which was I think ultimately a pretty freeing experience for all of us that we had
Sure.
unintentionally, I guess, but intentionally, since we were entered into this commitment to work through those design principles, figuring out how to communicate with one another in a respectful way that took away the difficult conversations part of a director and staff member relationship, or even a staff member to staff member conversation. Like, how do you make that less of a headbutting moment when there's conflict and more of a, here is this thing that I have to talk to you about, here are these feelings that I have around it, and how can we adapt so that we're both in a better space over whatever decision that is that would need to be made.
Sure. So it sounds like communication was really, really important.
Yep.
And we know that in organizations.
Yep.
And it's amazing the degree to which it sounds like that was able to really change your culture. It also sounds like the amount of time it took, the patience that you were engaging. That's one thing we notice when organizations are going through culture change, is that people tend to be pretty impatient. They want results right away. And then they get anxious when that doesn't happen. And so the ability to move into that transparency of, here's what we're all going through and here's how we're going to all relate, and being able to be really, really personal about it, really, I believe, help with your culture change from what I've seen of other organizations as well. So that's a really, really strong thing you all did under really trying circumstances. So congratulations.
Thanks.
So if somebody else found themselves in this sort of position, what one piece of advice would you give to them under those circumstances?
Well, I think for me, it was patience. I am not a patient person. I am the person who likes their checklist, and they like the satisfaction of marking off all of the things that they were able to accomplish in a day, in a month, in a year. But that isn't possible, especially when you're going through a leadership change in an organization. It's maybe not in good taste to come in and just change everything completely. And so being able to put my ego aside, being able to take time to listen to the staff's needs and what they aspire for the land connection and for our team was really important. And then to just exhibit patience through that whole process. I think that was the most critical thing for me. I think each one of the staff members would probably have a different part that they played in that role. Another thing I think that was important was just being transparent and being able, again, to set my ego aside and say that, this is a really difficult moment for me. This is a difficult decision for me. I want to take into account everyone's feelings and needs, but we also have to go forward in one direction. And being able to have that honest, transparent discussion with the staff members as you're working through changes in an organization, it's really important to building the trust and respect that you aren't out to get them, that you're not there to serve yourself, but you're there to serve us. I think, those two things were probably two critical things I brought to that culture change.
So transparency, really, and humanizing the workplace, and being patient enough to allow it to take root and grow rather than expecting it all to happen at once.
Right, and in nonprofit, not every day is a good day, right? We have bad days, and if you don't give space for those bad days, then it just builds tension, right? It's like pushing it further down until those bad days have just mounted, and then everything looks bad. There's nothing good about what you're doing. So that open, honest communication helps resolve some of those strong feelings you might have on that bad day or in that bad moment.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, as members of Champaign Center Partnership, one of the things that the partnership is really seeking to do is to create space for its members to collaborate and grow together. So is there a challenge that you're still facing that you'd like to, that you welcome help from other people in the community, peers from the community?
I think for me, I've noticed since being in a nonprofit leadership role that there's often a hesitancy in reaching out to other individuals in your position or similar roles that could offer you expertise or knowledge or skills that you're lacking in, because it's kind of an admission of defeat, right? That I wasn't able to do everything, so I obviously am not good at this. And so I would really value a space where, we could be talking about different business issues like human resources or, finance and accounting and all of those things that we didn't set out in the world to be responsible for, but suddenly
Right.
as the leader of a business, you have to have all of these skills now
Sure.
that, make you 5 different professional roles. So I would love, a space where that collaboration could happen more freely without the worry or concern that there's this judgment happening over your ability as a leader or a director or CEO or whatever your role is.
Sure, sure. So that safe space to work on those areas that you may not that come along with professional role, but weren't the things you really kind of jumped into the role for.
Sure, and even, I didn't go to college to be an executive director of a nonprofit. I was a music teacher, and I think for a lot of individuals in a leadership role in nonprofit, they often aren't set on a trajectory that gives them all of the skills they need to
Sure.
to operate a successful organization. And so, I am a lifelong learner, and to me, there's always more that I can take from other people that have more experience and knowledge in certain areas.
Certainly, certainly. Well, that's really important, and I agree with you that that would be a really important resource to have in this community as well. So, looking forward to the next 6 to 12 months, what is inspiring you? What do you see on the horizon? What excites you?
We are really just at the beginning of experiencing a shift in our culture, and we're headed in a direction that's giving us this opportunity to be able to do the good things that we want to do. And so instead of having to say, this is a good idea, but sorry, we can't afford it, so this has to go on the back burner, we get to say, this is a good idea, and let's go forward with it. And so that's, I think, what our team's looking forward to the most, is being able to select the things that we feel serve our purpose and our mission the most.
That's really awesome to hear, because that to me sounds like vision, and it also sounds like empowerment, which is some of the stuff that you've been working on through your culture change.
Sure.
So I'm really excited to see where that leads you.
Thanks.
So thank you for being a part of this conversation today. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, can they reach out to you by email to dig a little deeper? Would that be something you'd be open to?
Yes, email is the best way to contact me.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'll provide that for folks
Thank you.
as we publish this video. But thank you so much for chatting with us today, and for stopping by and speaking with us.